I've always been daunted by classics. These are pieces of art that changed people's lives, that influenced many things in the years since their release. These works are old, so they will need to be approached with a different mindset, though many contain themes and ideas still relevant today, and tomorrow for that matter. When a work gets inducted into the pantheon of classics, a set of impossibly high expectations accompany it. And with those expectations, there is an understated anxiety. What if I become the only person in the world that doesn't like it? Shadow of the Colossus might have been the game to enter that pantheon faster than any other. This is a title that is so confident, so unapologetic in its approach and its design. It's a game that I adore, though I have to admit that adoration is relatively new. See, Shadow of the Colossus and I have a bit of a complicated relationship. It was a bumpy ride, but I think I experienced this game in the best way possible. It wasn't the way the developers intended, but it was a journey of self-discovery, one that illustrates why this game remains so effective all these years later. For the uninitiated, Shadow of the Colossus is a simple story, a vacant landscape, and 16 boss battles. A man named Wander enters a forbidden land and places an unconscious woman named Mono on an altar. A mysterious spirit called Dorman offers a bargain. Defeat the 16 creatures inhabiting the world, and she will be revived. Wander crosses this empty world in search of these creatures. They are towering colossi who can only be defeated by finding weak points on their heads or abdomens and stabbing them. And how exactly does Wander do that? Well, by climbing them, of course. This contrast in scale is what Shadow of the Colossus hinges on. A small, fragile human, only 5 to 6 feet tall, must outwit and defeat these gargantuan monsters. Each of these 16 battles are completely different from one another. They all require patience and precision. If you find yourself on the back of a Colossus and it starts moving, you better hold on for dear life. Plunging the sword into one of these guys to deliver a killing blow feels satisfying, though the act doesn't quite feel heroic. Dark tendrils take hold of Wander after every battle, after which he's transported back to the altar where he must go on another quest to defeat another Colossus. There are no obstacles standing between Wander and his next target. The Forbidden Lands are a lonely place. No music plays. Only the sound of wind can be heard. Fumito Ueda, the game's director, is famous for popularizing the design by subtraction mentality. Strip away as much extra stuff as possible until you're left with the purest expression of an idea, not unlike cutting a diamond. Shadow of the Colossus has no fat to trim. No excessive cutscenes, no minor enemies to defeat, no side quests, no repeated ideas. The game communicates one idea loud and clear. You're not supposed to be here. Several months after I graduated from school, I got a full-time job in my own apartment in a city I had never really been to before. It gave me whiplash. I went from feeling on top of the world to becoming the inexperienced new guy at the office, at least 10 years younger than everyone else. It was humbling. Now that I had some time on my hands, I took it upon myself to play through a lot of classic games on the PlayStation 1 and 2 that I had missed out on in my Nintendo-heavy youth. This is when I first experienced Metal Gear Solid, the Silent Hill games, Symphony of the Night, God of War, Final Fantasy IX, Parasite Eve, and, of course, Ico and Shadow of the Colossus. It was nice to finally experience these games firsthand after hearing about them my whole life. Some of them have become all-time personal favorites, especially Silent Hill 2. Though many showed their age, especially Silent Hill 2. But what made them special still shone through. I played through Ico, Fumito Ueda's directorial debut. It's a short puzzle game about a boy with horns and a mysterious girl trapped inside a gigantic castle. The player takes control of the boy and he controls... well... Okay, the controls in Ico are slippery. Everything feels like it's on some sort of delay. His run cycle just feels off-kilter. His jumps aren't anything but graceful. He swings a stick as a weapon and it doesn't feel empowering at all. And yet, it works. Ico is all about feeling small, like this giant castle doesn't want you to escape from it. This horned kid isn't a brave swordsman or a platforming mascot or a chosen hero. He's just a kid in a situation that is much larger than him. However, the game will never ask the player to do something outside of the control scope. Iko, that's the kid's name by the way, will have to jump over a chasm, and doing so is totally possible. Though the wonky and sluggish controls make the player feel like they're not entirely in control of the situation. He'll have to fend off a bunch of shadows, so he'll whack them with a stick. It's unceremonious, it's inelegant, but it makes sense for this character in the situation that he's in. Iko's controls complement its design, story, setting, and character. I had a great time with it. Then I moved on to Shadow of the Colossus. I did not have a great time with it. Shadow of the Colossus has one of the most unintuitive control schemes I've ever seen. The first taste of gameplay is Wander's run cycle. He runs like a Monty Python character. The jump is slow and floaty. In fact, Wander and Iko control really similarly. The only thing is Iko has to climb up a static castle. Wander has to climb up this thing. Iko also has the advantage of a mostly static camera. In Shadow, the camera is something you have to constantly wrestle with. Oftentimes, it prioritizes showing a pretty shot over communicating information. Aiming the bow isn't fantastic either. It is so hard to get on the horse. Just get on the horse. Wander, get on the horse. Wander! Comparing Wander to another guy with a sword protagonist doesn't do him any favors. He's just not really a fun character to control. And that's before getting into a Colossus battle. Holding R1 makes Wander hold on to the nearest ledge or fuzzy part of a Colossus. He has a stamina meter, that's this red circle in the corner, and he can only hold on for a limited amount of time. And he's getting thrashed about. Jumping up a creature isn't guaranteed. You want to stab the weak point? Too bad. Hold on for longer. Did you get thrown off? Well, climb back up. At that point in time, I found the controls of Shadow of the Colossus to be extremely perplexing. So much work went into creating these fights. This is a carefully crafted game that looks gorgeous on the PS2. The creatures are beautiful, the music is phenomenal. Why then is the very foundation, the way the user interacts with the software, so weird? I was probably stressed about something else going on. I honestly don't remember. But I kept playing. To defeat the third Colossus, you have to get him to break his armor by hitting this pedestal in the middle of the arena. How's anyone supposed to figure that out? The fourth Colossus involves hiding underground, waiting for him to check on you, then jumping up his hair. Like, what? I just wasn't having fun. Skill issue? Yes, absolutely skill issue. But I still wasn't having a good time. I made it to the 12th Colossus, the one that floats in the water, and Wander has to swim around it to get onto its back. He then has to strike the teeth-like horns on its head to direct it, then jump onto a nearby structure. And look, I'm not proud of this. I'm really not. But there's only so much glitchy swimming a guy can take. So I said no. Just under 3/4 of the way through, I rage quit this esteemed classic. I declared that Shadow of the Colossus was a fundamentally flawed game and that everyone who liked it was wrong. I'm really glad I did not have a YouTube channel back then. And that's where I left it for years. Wander's journey remained incomplete. Mono still lay on the altar, lifeless. Breath would never return to her lungs. The 11 prior Colossi died in vain. The remaining 5 still roamed the Forbidden Lands. And I was bitter. I would read glowing reviews, personal accounts of how much this game had changed lives, and I would just wonder, how? A remake of the game dropped on the PlayStation 4, a faithful recreation of this supposed masterpiece, and with it came more discussions of how important this game is. Meanwhile, my Wander from all those years ago still floated in the water beneath the game's 12th foe. Over time, though, my negative feelings began to fade. I would play many more games, both new and old, modern classics and classic classics. I would play games directly inspired by Team Ico. I would continue to explore games of all shapes and sizes. I would learn more about the developers and their inspirations. I would continue to watch plenty of game analysis on YouTube. And one name would continue to crop up: Shadow of the Colossus. Many years after drowning Wander in a lake, I did the unthinkable. I booted up the game. I watched that bird fly through the desolate mountain range. I watched as Wander crossed the bridge and placed Moto on the altar, listened as the mysterious spirit doorman beckoned him to slay the 16 creatures. The cutscenes ended, and I was handed control. I had returned to the Forbidden Lands. Wander's run cycle was still weird, getting on the horse was still hilarious, but this attempt went completely differently from before. The first fight didn't go so great. To down this one, the player has to stab a weak point on the back of the Colossus's leg. This will make it trip, after which the player can climb up the suspicious platforms on its back. Wander kept getting stuck on the corners. He wouldn't jump when I told him to jump. For a brief moment, I felt those old opinions resurfacing. I struggled to climb to the top of the creature and stabbed it in the head. It was a slow, awkward battle, but I won. The second Colossus is a much larger quadruped. It raises its front legs, showing pale yellow feet. The player has to shoot the bow to make it fall over, after which they can climb up its back. It was on the back of this creature, after I had stabbed its weak points a few times, when this happened. And then everything clicked. Wander lost his balance. He tripped. Game characters don't really trip, do they? In regards to the controls, Shadow of the Colossus has to do two things. Wander has to feel small and malleable. The player has to feel his human limitations. This means that when a Colossus is thrashing him about in every direction, there is a very real possibility that he will fall. Missing a jump will be a common occurrence. Climbing up to a weak spot isn't the end. The player has to wait for a moment when it's calm enough to handle a sword. There are limitations to Wander's movement that make the battles more difficult than they would be if he wasn't so spongy. At the same time, there are concessions to those limitations. If Wander is holding on to a ledge or a fuzzy part of a creature, he will always hold on as long as the player keeps the button pressed and the stamina gauge still has juice. Even when a Colossus is thrashing him about, when it would be perfectly understandable for him to lose his grip, Wander holds on. His jump looks silly when he's on the ground, but in these battles, you best believe this moon jump comes in handy. Wander's movement has to balance these two ideas. If he's too much like a ragdoll, then it would become more about finite motor movement than figuring out how to defeat the bosses. But if he just snaps to whatever surface he's on, then a lot of the tension in these fights just wouldn't be there. The game picks and chooses what actions fall into which camp. So when Wander tripped on the back of the second Colossus, I got the intended reaction, an "oh no" moment. All throughout this battle, I scrambled to hold on to whatever surface I could when Wander lost his balance. This feeling, that sensation of being slightly out of control, is what the entire game hinges on. Perhaps it was because I knew the solution already, but the third and fourth fights made a lot more sense as well. These fights are all about outsmarting the Colossi, getting them to do what you want them to do. Their behaviors are predictable, and the player has to use those behaviors against them. They have to treat them like living creatures. The game made so much more sense on my second attempt. I blasted through over half the game in a single sitting. Crawling across the eel-like body of the 7th Colossus was tense. Knocking the 8th Colossus off the wall and scrambling to it was organically thrilling. When I finally made it on the back of the 9th Colossus after a handful of tries, I felt like I had actually summited a mountain. Part of me wondered how I could have ever hated this game. How could I not have seen how the controls enhanced each battle's intensity and made the characters feel smaller? The next day, I turned the game back on. I made it to the 12th Colossus, the one that made me quit the game years before. And this battle was rough. The camera went haywire. I'm sure there's a better way to get behind it, but whatever. I missed the jump from the head to the platform more than once. But I didn't get frustrated, not especially. I just tried again. I made that jump. I found its weak spot. I got thrown into the water again. I climbed up it again. I eventually did what I was unable to do all those years ago. I bested the 12th Colossus. After this, the last 4 fights remained. I scaled the 13th, taunted the 14th, shimmied around the 15th, and climbed to the very top of the 16th. It was finally done. The ending cutscene played. A group of soldiers stormed the temple just in time to see that the 16th Colossus had fallen. They notice Mono on the altar and figure out what's going on. Wander is transported to the floor behind them. We discover the truth. The Dark Spirit Dorman was broken into 16 pieces. With each piece free, it can now be reincarnated. It can take over Wander's body and roam the land once more. The soldiers retreat. As they leave, they cast a spell of light, hoping to seal away the spirit for good. The bridge to the Forbidden Lands crumbles behind them. Dorman struggles to find his footing, but gets sucked into the pool of light. And then, Mono wakes. As the credits roll, we see the bodies of the slain Colossi. All of this death and destruction, all of that struggling, it was all a trick. Even though Wander was able to accomplish what he set out to do, even though Mono's heart beats once again, it cost him everything. But then I had the thought, is this the bad ending? Shadow of the Colossus only has this one ending. Nothing the player can do can change how this final cutscene plays out, except there is one thing they can do. I did it several years ago. The game's story is all about cheating death, about trying to circumvent the inevitable, about the bargaining stage of grief. In refusing to accept a world without Mono, Wander loses everything. He continues to climb the impossible giants, risking his life over and over to defeat them. He gets consumed by the dark tendrils and keeps going. But what if he stopped? What if he decided all of this wasn't worth it? What if he figured out midway through that it was all a scheme from a nefarious spirit? What if he took the disc out of the PS2 and swore off the Forbidden Lands forever? I mean, in that case, wouldn't the best ending be just to turn off the game after the opening? To let the first Colossus and its 15 siblings continue to roam the land? To keep all fragments of the spirit locked away where they belong? When I finished the game as intended, Wander was able to resurrect Mono. Although the bridge to leave has been destroyed. She's trapped in this desolate world with no means of escape. I was glad to have finally rolled credits on this classic game. I was happy to have finally had the experience so many people before me had grown to love, even though I was embarrassed to have harbored negative feelings for it for so long. A few days later, I found a copy of the PS4 remake at my local used game store and bought it with little hesitation. I so rarely play games multiple times through so close together, but I wanted more. I mean, who wouldn't want better visuals and a smoother frame rate? So I once again returned to the Forbidden Lands. I watched as a high-definition Wander placed a high-definition Mono on a more detailed altar. The journey began. I defeated each Colossus in short order, knowing exactly what to do. Wander would fall, but would catch himself. He would hold on for dear life. He would wait for the right moment to plunge his blade into the sigil on each beast's head. He knew he had to make the third Colossus strike the stone platform to break its armor. He knew he had to hide in the cave and climb up the fourth Colossus's braids. The 12th Colossus battle was still annoying, but climbing on the back of the 13th? There's nothing like it. And it was a struggle in places. The controls were still spongy. Wander lost his balance. Aiming was a little smoother. Getting on the horse was easy? Wait, you can just get on the horse now? But each battle, even on the third time through, was still marvelous, nerve-wracking, awe-inspiring, especially with the glow-up 13 years of technology gave to this game from 2005. On this playthrough, something else happened. I played right into Dorman's hand. On my first failed attempt, I had the suspicion that there was some catch to slaying these colossi. I wasn't enjoying the game, so my progress was slow. I questioned more often than once if I should just give up, eventually deciding to abandon the quest. On my second attempt, I still had that suspicion. The broad strokes of the story had already been spoiled for me, but I kept going. I was able to wrap my head around the game's quirks. What I saw as flaws in the past actually enhanced what the game was going for. I had the experience and maturity to meet the game on its own terms. I knew what Wander was doing would lead to his demise, but I kept going anyway. On my third attempt, I ran to these colossi. I knew exactly how to knock them off balance, how to scale them, and where to stick my sword. I felled these 16 beasts with little hesitation, watched as Wander became increasingly corrupted. But I didn't care. I kept going. I wanted to fight the next one, and the one after that. I had become like Wander. This third time through was the most fun I had with Shadow of the Colossus, but it was also the darkest. Everything about the game was screaming that I wasn't supposed to be there. You're in the Forbidden Lands. Get out. Climbing up these things is difficult. A sane person would just stop after falling off of one of these things the first time. Why are you doing this? There is nothing for you to find in this barren land. Okay, some lizards, cool, whatever. But wouldn't you rather explore an open world that has, actual stuff in it? You're not supposed to be here. This world wasn't made for you. But it was made for me. Even though it's uninviting, this is the only space Wander can explore. And conversely, this space can only be explored by this one character. And despite all of its rough edges, I wanted to keep exploring it. I wanted to outsmart these creatures and lead them to their dooms once again. After Mona wakes up, she approaches the spot where Dormin and Wander were sealed away. There's a baby there, a child with horns. She roams the Forbidden Lands with this mysterious baby, and she finds a garden with a deer. At last, another living thing in this desolate world. Without the Colossi, without Dormin, perhaps life will return to this place. Maybe there is hope after all. The second time seeing this ending made me realize something else, that I was completely wrong. The game's true ending is the good ending. This strange spirit was broken into 16 pieces to keep it sealed away, but in doing so the world became lifeless. In order to truly enact change, in order to bring vibrance back to this cursed world, that evil needs to be defeated. Maybe it will come back, but if nothing happens, then the world will never see life again. It will languish and decay, never reaching its true potential. Years ago, I vowed to never play Shadow of the Colossus ever again. It was the one classic game I would scoff at. But it wasn't until I questioned why I was feeling the way that I felt that I was able to break apart those issues. I think back then I just wanted to be powerful. I wanted to get to the top of the monsters and be done with it. I didn't want to be reminded of my own limitations. It wasn't until I overcame what I once viewed as an insurmountable obstacle that I was able to see what made it so special. I was able to let go of this grudge. And in letting go, I could see the beauty in this thing that I had sworn off. Life could return to this once barren place. I had a complicated relationship with Shadow of the Colossus, and I think I'm better off because of it.